Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jared Blumenfeld. I'm the Secretary of Cali, PA, and we really appreciate you joining us today for our conversation to share the highlights of water investments from the governor's proposed 2022-23 budget. And I'm joined by my fellow secretaries, Secretary Wade Crowfoot of the Natural Resources Agency and Secretary Karen Ross of the California Department of Food and Agriculture. And we're further pleased to be joined today by our colleagues in the governor's office and representatives from the Department of Finance. Our colleagues leading this work will be available to answer questions during the Q&A portion, including the California Department of Water Resources Director, Carla Nemeth, the Department of Fish and Wildlife Director, Chuck Bonham, and State Water Resources Control Chair, Joaquin Esquivel, and the State Water Resources Control Board Executive Director, Eileen Sobek. So as many of you know, unless you were living somewhere else or on a different planet, January, February, and March of this year were the driest on record. And that record dates back 100 years. So we had just 6 inches of precipitation observed across the Sierra Nevada, and all of our 58 counties here in the state are under a drought emergency proclamation. The May revise reflects the administration's focus on making California more drought resilient into the future while managing through current weather extreme. This includes investments to support local and regional agencies as they manage through the weather extremes that we're seeing, ensure all Californians have safe and affordable drinking water, maximize water conservation efforts, protect fish and wildlife, and support climate-smart agricultural practices that bolster the state's farm economy. The next hour is a chance to answer your questions about the governor's May revision, which allocates an additional $1.6 billion for drought relief, including $250 million set aside as a contingency in the governor's budget, for a total of $2 billion. This comes in addition to the budget that the governor articulated on Jan 10 of $5.2 billion and a 3-year investment in drought response and water resilience. Before I get into some of the specifics of funding, I want to highlight that key to our drought efforts are conservation efforts. Today, in response to the governor's executive order on drought, the Water Board will release draft emergency regulations on conservation for adoption by the board on May 24th, rather, sorry. The draft aims to further water conservation and ban irrigation of non-functional turf. This May revision package provides additional funds for California water infrastructure with $400 million to leverage resources approved in the federal infrastructure bill. This $400 million can potentially yield $2 billion in federal funds for California's water infrastructure needs. The combined federal and state funds will help address the longstanding need to replace California's aging infrastructure, make our state more resilient to climate change, address water reliability, and meet the human right to water's goal that every person in the state has the right to clean, safe, and affordable drinking water. The budget proposal includes $44 million to develop the technical and regulatory tools needed to modernize the administration of water rights and increase water supply certainty during times of drought. This will help California build a sound foundation for how water diversion and water use are managed in response to extreme wet and dry conditions that we are experiencing under a changed climate. To protect our limited water supplies, the budget proposes $8 million to prevent illegal water diversions and water theft during droughts so that senior water right holders, natural resources, and other critical health and human safety supplies are protected. The budget proposes $50 million from the general fund to support emergency drinking water needs, including supporting community water systems and households served by smaller water systems and domestic wells. This is an increase of $25 million compared to Governor Newsom's January 10 budget. The funds will be used to expand countywide and regional programs to support both interim and permanent solutions for drought-impacted households. These programs can be tailored to the areas and can address a variety of needs, such as bottled water, hauled water and storage tanks, water vending machines, permanent connections to adjacent water systems, or well repair and replacement. This budget proposal includes an additional $100 million for recycled wastewater. This is in addition to $350 million authorized for recycled wastewater and groundwater cleanup in the state's budget last year. Recycled water is critical to diversifying and augmenting local supplies and transforming waste into a valuable resource. And because we've learned that there can be unexpected issues that can arise when we need to be prepared to immediately respond to them, we've included a $71 million contingency fund for quick response to any new worsening drought issues that may arise. I'll now hand it over to Secretary Wade Crowfoot to discuss the investments within the Natural Resource Agency.
Hey, big thanks, Jared, and big thanks to our water team across our agencies. I've had a chance to work in state government almost a decade, and I have to say the level of coordination, collaboration among Water Board and DWR and Fish and Wildlife and Food and Ag and our two agencies is really, really, really strong. And it's important that it is because we're facing unprecedented challenges with our water systems that have such huge impacts on agricultural communities, communities across the state, fish and wildlife, and really, kind of our way of life in California. So Jared sort of laid out the frame of the overall funding, and I think we're all proud that between the legislature and the governor, we are spending what is the most ever amount of funding we've ever spent in our general fund on water. And we're doing that between specifically responding to drought impacts, the here and now, whether that's communities without water or salmon in peril as a result of warming river temperatures, but also with overlapping investments that are building our longer-term drought resilience. One thing scientists tell us is we are in a mega drought across our region, across the American West. And 5 of the last 7 years have been drought years. So as my colleague Joaquin explains, we should get away from drought response and really move into drought management. And so I'm glad to highlight some key areas of proposed funding in our agency, really that Carla and Chuck in Water Resources and Fish and Wildlife helped us build out. The first that I'll mention is $180 million proposed to replenish drought relief grant programs to small communities as well as larger urban water districts. Pretty remarkable. Since last August, when those programs were established, DWR has distributed $174 million to 85 small community projects from Trinidad and Humboldt County to the Tule River Tribe in Tulare County. DWR has also distributed $233 million to larger water districts around the state, like Santa Margarita Water District in Orange County, which received $4.5 million for groundwater filtration plant and new pipelines. So I think we're really glad that this funding, as directed by the legislature and governor, is moving through DWR and getting to specific shovel-ready projects that build drought resilience now. And the governor's May revision proposes $180 million of additional funding for that. You may also recall that the governor back in January proposed $100 million to support local water conservation, including $75 million for rebates to change out grass for more water-friendly plants. This May revise goes further and would invest an additional $100 million in the forward-facing public education campaign that we call Save Our Water, to really ensure that all Californians understand the worsening drought conditions and what they can do to play a part in navigating this drought. One key message for Save Our Water is to limit outdoor water use. We know that a lion's share of water use, and frankly, in some cases, water waste, is overwatering our lawns. And so Save Our Water is really driving home that message. Increasingly warm temperatures and less water in our reservoirs mean really challenging condition for our salmon, which are, of course, this native fish species that's been returning to California's rivers for thousands of years. And I'm excited that our proposal in the May revise includes $100 million to our Department of Fish and Wildlife to protect salmon. We're working to get habitat projects, refugia projects, habitat connectivity projects in place more quickly and cost effectively through our Cutting the Green Tape initiatives. And this funding promises to bring on more habitat restoration and critical environmental projects for the benefit of salmon more quickly. The May budget revise also proposes $17 million to Fish and Wildlife to figure out how to revamp our hatcheries in the age of climate change. For some hatcheries, for example, it's time to move from outdoor concrete raceways for the young fish to indoor climate-controlled aquaculture systems. Our hatcheries play a really important role for our fisheries, and so we want to adapt them to climate change. In the Department of Water Resources, our proposal also continues to propose funding our FIRO, or Forecast Informed Reservoir Operations, where smart people at DWR are partnering with reservoir managers and key academics, as well as the Army Corps of Engineers, to move towards operating our reservoirs more flexibly, both for flood control, but also water supply. We also have funding that is incentivizing farmers to create seasonal habitat for migratory birds. That's been really successful up in the Sacramento Valley, and we're excited about proposed funding that continues that, as well as to make more flow available in our Delta, which was a project underway last year that water users would voluntarily participate in, and so funding for that. Really extraordinary times given our worsening drought and our water challenges, and we're excited that this funding is going to be, we want it to be part of the solution. And so with that, I'll turn it to my colleague, Karen Ross, who is really has a very difficult job of leading our drought response in support of our agricultural communities across the state. Karen.
Thank you, Wade, and thank you, Jared. It is such an honor to serve with both of you in this administration, and to our water team, thank you for the collaboration that we enjoy. And I especially want to thank Governor Newsom for his continuing leadership on the many climate and drought challenges that we face here in California. And so I'm going to touch on just a few of the items that are I wanted to highlight that are at the Department of Food and Agriculture. This revised budget proposal would increase current fiscal year funding by $110 million for our state water enhancement and efficiency program. That's our SWEEP program that was actually initiated in 2014. But as technology changes and there are opportunities for even more precise use of this very precious resource, we know that there's still at almost an unbelievable demand for this type of a program. It provides incentive grants to farmers in addition to demonstration projects and to technical assistance to make sure that our smallest farmers and those that are historically underserved know about our programs and are able to apply successfully for these programs. Since the initiation of the program in 2014, we have awarded over $123 million in grants for 1,100 different projects that are providing an annual water savings of more than 47.1 billion gallons, which is the equivalent of over 71,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools. In carrying on our work that was initiated during COVID with a special mini grant program to small and historically underserved farmers, this budget proposes $25 million for the California Underserved and Small Producers Grant Program. They are facing increased costs for water and utilities, just like many citizens are. And this is a program that will really help them keep farming during these unprecedented times. Additionally, this budget proposes $15 million for a water efficiency technical assistance program, which is really enhancing this human infrastructure of experts that can be available to work with farmers at the farm level to improve their water, their energy, and their nutrient management efficiency. I also want to call out one program that's not housed at the Department of Food and Agriculture, but it is going to be, I think, a critically important program for our rural communities. It's a $75 million small business assistance grant program that will be housed at GoBiz. This will provide support to farmers, small businesses, and those ag-related businesses where with the increased volume of fallowed acres impact all of these input providers and service providers, and will help them with these grants in the range of $30,000 to $50,000, keep employees hopefully on the payroll, and keep these rural communities as vibrant as we possibly can while we address the challenges of climate and drought. All of these programs and many more throughout this year's budget will really provide important support to our growers as they work even harder to conserve increasingly scarce resources and maintain the bountiful, nutritious food production that we all enjoy. Their innovation has allowed them to increasingly improve their stewardship practices and increase their water use efficiency. PPIC reports that based on the numbers that are available to us, ag water use, applied water use has decreased 14% between 1980 and 2015, while productivity has actually increased by 38%. We will need to do this and more in these unprecedented times. And I just want to close by saying, I know how hard hit multiple rural communities in particular are with climate change, extreme heat, and this drought that is fallowing more acres than we've ever seen in the Sacramento Valley, and will surpass maybe even 2015 fallowed acreage in the San Joaquin Valley. So with that, I'm especially grateful for the governor's commitment to work with our farmers and ranchers to maintain their productivity. And I look forward to working with all of you as well as the legislature as we bring this budget to conclusion this year. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Erin Curtis, who will help moderate the many questions that I'm sure people have for us. Thanks.
Thank you, Secretary Ross. And I'll just let folks know, it looks like many of you have figured it out, but if you do have questions, please type it into the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we will do our best to answer as many as we can. Online, we can follow up afterwards with many of you as well. I also want to let folks know that we are recording this, and you can get a recording of this briefing later on the Natural Resources Agency's main webpage in order to access this if you'd like to revisit it or share it with others. I'm going to start with a question that we've received from a number of folks in regards to the $500 million for water storage in the May revise. We've had a lot of questions about that in regards to what department will receive those funds, how those funds will be dispersed, and whether those are for Proposition 1 projects or new projects. I'm going to open this up for Sergio Aguilar with the Department of Finance to answer.
Hi, thank you. Matt Almy, actually, at the Department of Finance. And as indicated, the May revision includes $500 million in general fund in budget year 25-26. Which would be eligible for 7 water storage projects that are now underway. In March, the Water Commission provided approximately $64 million in available funding for surface and groundwater storage projects eligible within the Water Storage Investment Program. If completed, those projects together would boost the total water storage capacity in the state by 2.7 million acre feet, more than twice the capacity of Folsom Lake. This money is available in the out years to go towards those strategic projects.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it. Next question is in regards to the banning of non-functional turf. And I'm going to ask someone from the State Water Board to answer. Would the ban on irrigation of non-functional turf include prohibiting irrigation with recycled water?
Hi, Erin. This is Joaquin, and thanks, Noel, for the question. Recycled turf that is irrigated with recycled water is not included in the ban. And important to remember as well that the definition of non-functional turf and then its banning is for commercial, institutional, and industrial uses, and not meant to impact recreational uses as well. But included in there is then turf that is irrigated with recycled water, and it is not included in the ban.
Thanks, Joaquin. I think the next question might be yours as well in regards to the water and wastewater arrearages program. And are there any specifics on where those funds are being used?
The $200 million is going to CSD to augment what is around 100-ish million that they received from the federal government for the low-income rate assistance program on the water side. That was part of a previously passed federal bill. CSD has been doing great work in trying to sign folks up for that long-term program. Our program was an arrears program and an emergency fashion. So this 200, again, is going to go to CSD to augment the 100 million that they have for a longer-term program.
Great, thanks. And while we're at it, Joaquin, one more for you. How will the $75 million to replace turf with drought-tolerant landscapes be distributed and made available?
That will be a program with the Department of Water Resources, and they'll be developing guidelines, and we'll be helping those as well. But that might be a question best for Carla.
Yeah, hi there. I can take that question. We are working on developing guidelines so that we would be ready to go on July 1st when the new fiscal year starts. A couple of the things that we're looking into along that vein is, what worked in the previous drought with state investment in turf removal. Oftentimes it was a partnership with other local water districts, so it was combined rebates to help folks along. But we are also working with in the environmental justice community to understand the ways in which low-income communities and underrepresented communities are able to engage in those kinds of rebate programs. Our understanding is that there may be some real need to think about more direct install, meaning where we don't leave it necessarily to the property owner to do it. And so we're investigating all those kinds of things, and that will be part of our grant guidelines. And then lastly, I would say, particularly in areas where, again, there's a real recreational need for turf, be it schools and other places. We do know that there are places across California where that kind of turf is, the more water hungry kind of turf. And there's been a lot of technological advancement in new kinds of turf that can dramatically reduce the amount of irrigation needed. And we are looking at a program that could be open to that kind of turf replacement, particularly in areas where turf is an important public health amenity in a community. Again, oftentimes there's challenges in underrepresented communities for their local parks and schools where folks need that kind of turf to recreate. So we're looking at all of those things to inform the grant guidelines that would then be made available on or around July 1st. Thank you.
Thanks, Carla. Appreciate it. Next question is for you, Secretary Ross. What do you envision the $50 million for Ag Drought Response program to be used for?
Again, not to punt to Carla, but that is a Department of Water Resources program, but it's one that we will collaborate with them very closely on.
Sure. So what we're taking a look at is, the complexities of drought, particularly as it relates to the stability of groundwater wells, community wells, domestic wells, particularly in the Central Valley. So one of the things that the department is focused on is there a way that we can work with local growers to target those areas where fallowing would also generate a benefit, or maybe phrased another way, would avoid a challenge for communities and domestic well users as an overall drought response, as opposed to digging deeper wells or additional wells. So again, this is a signal of us really sort of stretching the ways in which we can identify dollars that have multiple benefits when we have drought that's challenging in certain communities across multiple sectors. But that's what those dollars would be geared for. Maybe an analog is some work that we did last year with the Rice Commission, where the department provided a $10 million grant to the Rice Commission to work directly with rice growers to help support practices that support the Pacific Flyway, where we have an identified broader public benefit that we want to make sure the state can continue to support as part of its drought response. So something similar along those lines, but I think focused more fully on the Central Valley in this case.
Thank you, Director Nemeth. Next question is relating to SGMA. Given the projected amount of land that will go out of production under SGMA, as well as the high demand for the first round of funding, why was there not an increase in funding for the Department of Conservation's multi-benefit land repurposing program?
Hey, thanks, Aaron. I'm just toggling through my numbers here. It's a big day of numbers. I know that our Department of Conservation in our Natural Resources Agency is expecting to announce the initial planning grants as well as the initial implementation grants for the land repurposing here in coming weeks, and it's something that we're excited about. I also believe there's an additional $20 million for land repurposing in the May revise. And so we recognize that there's potential for more voluntary land repurposing, given the demand across different groundwater management agencies. But we're also really interested in getting these first tranches of funding off the ground to make sure that they're having their intended impact and that they're helpful to those folks, across the state who are implementing the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act.
And Wade, if I could follow on that, in the spirit of there's a lot to survey across the whole of May revise, there are some things all y'all may not see in the water context, which exist in another context that have a relationship to water. So the 20 million the secretary just mentioned, that's a May revise addition for conservation, is over in NatureBased Solutions. Just like you'll see over in that arena, things around our department now having a beaver restoration program and 5 full-time staff to do that work. So you won't find everything that has a connection to water just in water. It might be housed a little bit elsewhere in the budget.
Really good point, Chuck, just demonstrating the overlap of our different areas. And we're really excited about the resources for beavers as a really important agent of nature-based solutions.
Great, thanks. Next question. Can you share more about the money for aqueducts and solar projects?
I think that's to me. You may recall that the department did a pilot project with Turlock Irrigation District to sort of study the efficacy of solar panels over aqueducts. And we're excited about the potential there. And we think that there is more interest beyond that single water district. I should say that, of course, the State Water Project is the owner operator of many, many miles of aqueducts. We have looked at that rather intensely periodically for the State Water Project. There are a couple of sort of engineering reasons why it's not as quite a good fit for the State Water Project, but we think that at maybe a smaller scale, there's some real opportunity. And in so doing, that may also help us understand if there are ways that we can do it in a pilot format on smaller kinds of facilities that may also help us down the road understand how we might adapt it more broadly for state-owned facilities.
Thanks, Director Namath. I think the next question is probably for you as well. What kind of investments does the May revise include for DWR's Atmospheric Rivers Research Program to support drought resilience?
Great question. It includes $10 million in this May revise for this work, atmospheric river research and forecast-informed reservoir operations. It enables the department to work closely with a number of water districts and the Scripps Institute of Oceanography down in San Diego, which is really leading this kind of cutting-edge work in atmospheric river research. The overall goal is to improve our ability to predict them and predict their strength and their actual sort of geographic landfall location. We do a lot of work in all over the world in predicting hurricanes and things like that. We have yet to really sort of capture that same predictability sort of readiness aspects for the atmospheric rivers that are only growing in importance for California. So $10 million for that to the department for that collaborative effort.
Thanks. This next question is likely for someone with the State Water Board. How will the $44 million for water rights modernization and drought resilience for the Water Board be distributed?
Thanks, Joaquin. I can answer some of that there. And so about 43 million is going to the water rights modernization work, 26 permanent positions there, and about 38 million is in one-time contracts to enhance our drought planning and develop technical and regulatory tools to help us better administer things. That will include development of a telemetry project in 2 or 3 watersheds to collect real-time diversion data, integrate the data into the board's new water rights data system, and create some data governance and best practices.
Great. Thanks, Joaquin. This next question is in regards to multi-benefit floodplain restoration projects. Can you clarify how much funding has been allocated for planning and implementation of those? Maybe for Chuck, perhaps? Another part of that question, will any of that funding be earmarked for projects in or near disadvantaged communities?
Let me take the first part of the question. If you look across the May revised proposal, you'll see a recommended increase both in positions and funding for our department, the Department of Water Resources, and at the State Water Board to really come together in a multidisciplinary partnership way and accelerate the doing of restoration projects. So looking across everything we know we want to get done, many of which projects we've known for some time, where are they in their implementation and delivery? What are the barriers to turning dirt on those? And then applying this dedicated force to that. So for our department, that's 6 positions permanently and 2.8 million, but there's also similar aspects for the other 2 state entities.
Thanks, Chuck. And as it relates to disadvantaged communities, of course, DWR does quite a bit of work in all of our flood programs. And we are looking at equity issues in terms of how flood protection is provided. And certainly that's a lens through which we'll be looking at this funding coming to the department. One of the sort of examples is Hamilton City, a tremendous effort on the Sacramento River that took many years with a local community to protect that community from flooding, but also do it in a way that deals with restoration needs. The Nature Conservancy was a tremendous partner for the Department of Water Resources, as was the community in that effort. And we think that is a growing need, and especially in some of these rural communities that tend to be disadvantaged and generally underrepresented.
Thank you, Director Nemeth. Next question is going to be for Secretary Ross. As you know, many of California's ag water suppliers are still distributing water using gravity-fed systems. And when growers upgrade to drip and micro sprinkler systems, they're looking to get water delivery systems that can be pressurized. Is there funding in this budget to modernize water delivery infrastructure before it reaches farms?
It's a great question. It's something that we've looked at over the last 5 years in particular. And in fact, we did several years ago partner with DWR to use some bond funding at that time to put out a pilot program to have part of that funding from DWR fund the pressurizing of the delivery system at the water district. And then we would layer in sweep dollars to be able to really maximize and optimize the use of every drop of that water. Unfortunately, a 218 vote failed, and so they weren't able to put together the rest of that funding package. But we have been in discussions with program at DWR to do that again. And I would say with $110 million for the SWEEP program, it's a perfect time for us to take a look at what might be possible and to work with the districts. I will also note there's such advances in technology, even with the gravity-fed systems, of being able to optimize the efficiency of the delivery to really match better with the pressurized systems for SWEEP and other programs at the farm level. And that's one of the exciting things about what we're all investing in now is it's the latest science, the latest technology, and the latest innovation to really maximize the use of every drop.
Thank you, Secretary Ross. We've had a number of questions about augmenting staff for the State Water Board for response to drought. Joaquin, can you address those?
Yeah, thanks, Erin. As I just answered on the water rights modernization side, we did receive 26 positions there. 26 there. And then we also are receiving 17 on the water rights curtailment enforcement side. I'd also flag we have 8 that we're receiving for large scale habitat restoration work. It's actually really central and important to a lot of the things that we're involved in now. And then additionally, we did receive 29 new positions in order to implement and get the dollars out as in the state revolving fund as part of the bipartisan infrastructure law work that we're anticipating here, and that the $400 million match ask is part of.
Thanks, Joaquin. Next question. How long will the $200 million to the CSD for water bill repayments be available to be spent by the department? And does it have to all be spent in fiscal year 22-23?
Yeah, so this is being funded with the federal ARPA funding, which does have some restrictions on timeline and spending. And it would be June 30th, 2024. The date for which the funds need to be encumbered.
Excellent, thank you. Next question is in regards to the human right to water. Does the May Revise provide funding to implement the human right to water? And this question says in the Department of Water Resources.
Yeah, we are looking at a couple of positions to help the department get that work done, largely in the focus for our regional offices where we do a lot of very intensive community work.
Excellent, thank you, Director Namath. Next question is, can someone identify what those 7 WSIT projects are, those Proposition 1 projects? I can go ahead and do that. They're Los Vaqueros, Sites, Kern, Willow Springs, Harvest Water in South Sac, and Pacheco Reservoir. And all of that information can be found on the Water Commission website as well. There's another question in regards to Sigma and whether there will be money available for outreach related to Sigma.
Yes. Yes, with new dollars to help with Sigma grants, we certainly understand that will work better if we also augment the ability to do outreach and augment the ability for a broader array of stakeholder groups to participate.
Thank you. Another question, any funding to promote flood managed aquifer recharge projects?
I'm sorry, say that one again, Erin, if you could repeat.
They're looking for information regarding funding to promote flood managed aquifer recharge projects.
Yeah, so that would also largely come through our Sigma program. As you know, we had significant dollars in the previous budget, and this budget includes an augmentation for that program. So I would anticipate that some of those flood MAR projects would be part of that Sigma grant making.
Another question for you, Director Namath. Will there be funding set aside for IRWM regions?
So as you know, we are working on previously appropriated funding, and we have a couple of rounds of grants to get out for that. So that solicitation will be out soon. But in this May revise, we don't have additional dollars for that program. We're still working off of previously budgeted and appropriated dollars.
All right, we'll move on to the next question. And it's in regards, this one will be for you, Secretary Blumenfeld, I think, unless there's someone else who wants to grab it. But the legislature approved $30 million for PFAS remediation in last year's budget and promised a total of $100 million over 3 years. Is the remaining $70 million already earmarked in previous budgets? Will there be direction from the administration on how to direct those funds to the most impacted communities? Perhaps someone from the water board might be able to help.
Aaron, on how the money is kind of spread over various years or budget years, that's maybe something finance could chime in. When it comes to at least how we're going to direct the funding, the board will be adopting soon guidelines around the PFAS dollars that we have already received, and so you know that will be able to then move forward insofar as prioritizing. But again, and it'll all just depend how much we receive once we have those guidelines adopted. But again, the budget question across the years, I'm not too sure how to answer.
Yeah, so I'll jump in and just provide a little bit of more information on the fiscal year breakout. So in 21-22, there was a $30 million provided. In 22-23, there's going to be an additional $50 million. And then in 23-24, there's another $20 million for a total of $100 million over the 3-year period.
Thank you.
All right, another question. Can you provide any more specificity about the $90 million for inland wetlands projects?
Yeah, I'll take that one. If I'm tracking the questioner's math, I think they're referring to something over in the NatureBased Solutions package. There's 54 million to our department and 36 million to the Delta Conservancy. And these are existing grant programs at both entities that fund the restoration of non-coastal wetlands. So Delta is a great example. Most everyone knows we have about less than 10% of our original wetlands. And part of what the Conservancy and the department have done historically is fund to the greenhouse gas reduction program into this space, because wetland restoration can also capture carbon. It's a carbon sequestration benefit as well. So for our department, we will use our existing wetlands restoration program to run that money through, which a lot of the stakeholders, Ducks Unlimited and others, are familiar with. I think that's the math of where the 90 million is.
Thank you, Chuck. Appreciate it. One more question. Is the Sac Valley Habitat funding for rice decomposition, and will it follow the existing program that's already in place for these kinds of grants?
Yeah, so what you'll see in the May revise is a suggested augmentation to both DWR and DFW. We had great success last year in the drought, utilizing some programs with the Rice Commission, Nature Conservancy, and others, bird returns and reverse auctions. And what we were able to do was, through that partnership, get about 50,000 acres of habitat wet that would have not otherwise been wet for the benefit of migratory birds. So I think we're using that construct. And that's what the kind of 15 million May revise augmentation would move into.
Thank you, Director Bonham, and thanks to all of our speakers. That's the end of our session this afternoon. Really appreciate everyone's attention. If we were unable to get to your question, we can follow up offline. And I just want to remind folks that if you'd like a recording of this session, you can go to the Natural Resources webpage and there will be information on how to get access to that recording shortly. Thank you very much, everyone. Hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you.